Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to teach you how to connect Firebase to a TypeScript Next application while also using React hooks. There's multiple different ways to do it, but this is the way that I'm going to be doing it for a particular project, which is udubigem.com. So to start, I'm going to be showing off just a regular React app and just showing off something that I think you're going to need for later. So essentially we're going to be creating like this empty fragment element here. We're going to be nesting something like in a page, and then we're going to be having a function here which maybe takes in like 1 or 2 arguments, doesn't matter. And then we're going to have it return another element. We can call this like inner element 1. Inner element 1, and then we can have it do some stuff with that A and B. So we can actually have it have a prop called A, and then maybe we also want to have like B in there. So this won't compile correctly, and that's normal. That's because we didn't define page or inner element 1. So up here, what if we define inner element 1 in page? So what I want you to take note of is what I'm going to be doing with this. So page is going to be taking in children as a prop, and this is a functional component, so we can just deconstruct the children right here in the parameters. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to return something where we actually call the children, and then we can pass it values. So this children is actually this function. So it will take in an A and a B. So we can define the A and the B up here. So what if we let A equals 1 and we let B equal to ABC? So now it's still going to be crashing because we don't have inner element 1. So let's try and do inner element 1 really quick. Inner element 1, where we take in a prop called A, and then we can do return. It also has children in it, so we will pass in children. And so we could do A and then maybe a BR tag, and then we can do the children, and know that the children is actually going to be B. So if we tab back, we should see one line break and ABC, and that's exactly what we see. So this is an important thing for what I'm about to use in NextJS, because this is how I'm actually getting these values and passing them to the child. So inside my next application, I have this config file, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting all my Firebase config code in this file, so it's just all in one place. I'm going to save it. And then in my index.tsx file, I'm going to be importing this page element that has yet to be created, and I'm going to do the exact same thing as earlier. So what I did earlier is I basically have this page element, and then inside of it I'm going to be passing in data, and then I'm going to be returning just like maybe data.abc. And this data implicitly has an any type, and it will be an any type because the JSON data coming from Firebase can be anything. In this case, I'm just going to enforce that it's an any type. And just as a test, I have this test branch with this ABC in it, so you'll know when it updates. So I'm also going to be passing in a data route prop because I want this page to be used on any page. So I might want this data route to be used on like the index page, so I can grab the data for the index page. In this case, I'm just going to be grabbing the data for test. And so this is where the test and ABC come from in reference to my test and ABC on the Firebase. So now this looks fine, but how do we actually get Firebase into it? So now this is where the real hard part comes in. What we want to do is first Because we want to use hooks, we want to import React and use state and use effect from React. And then we also want to import Firebase from the Firebase/app, as well as importing the Firebase database. And last but not least, we also want to import the Firebase config from the global constant/config file. And so these are all the imports that we're going to be needing for this. First off, I want to initialize the app using the config from earlier. And that'll basically just initialize the application. And now what I want to do is I want to actually make this page element. And what it's going to do is it's going to take in the children, which is that function that we defined earlier, as well as the data route, which is the string. And for now, let's just return this empty React element. And so we want to provide a return type for this, and it's going to be a functional component where we're going to give it some page props. And so these page props up here, we're going to define as page props. And the children is actually going to be a function. Remember, we defined this function as data with an any, and what it returns is a JSX element. And the next thing is a data route, which is just a string. So these props will refer to these page props that we defined over here. And now we can see page is declared, but its value is never used. That's really simple to fix. We just export the page. So now we're going to program the meat of this function. So first we want to set up a place for the data to be stored by the Firebase database reference. So we're going to use a state for that, which is const of data and set data is equal to use state of null. Now note that we don't actually have these types being set here. So what we want to do to actually set the types for this use state in this particular case is to say it's going to be any or null. Now this is because the data coming in from Firebase is an any type, and the initial value we want to just be null in this particular case. You can set it to anything you really want to. You can make it undefined. In this case, I'm going to be setting it to null. So in addition to that, we actually have to use the useEffect hook in order to actually get this Firebase functionality up and running. So I'm going to be using a useEffect, and inside is a callback function where we're going to be doing the Firebase stuff. So I'm going to make a database reference, which is going to be a firebase.database.reference object type. And that's going to just be a firebase.database.reference to the data route that we defined earlier. And so again, the database reference on a value change, this is going to make it so that if a value is updated on Firebase, it's going to have a WebSocket connection that will update. So this, and it's going to have a snap, which is going to be of type firebase.database.data snapshot. And we're going to do stuff with that. Now note that these typings aren't actually needed because TypeScript actually infers these, but I just like to be very explicit about it. So now we're going to let this database value equal this snap.value, or it's going to just be an empty object. And then we're going to set the data to be the database value. And now that we have that, what we also want to do is make sure that we return a function that will make sure that the database reference turns off, because once this component unmounts, we want to make sure no more database references are being called because we don't want to use that bandwidth. And we're going to want to use this empty array to make sure that useEffect only runs once. And there we go. Now we have our data being updated to this data object. And now what I'm going to just do is a simple thing, which is to make sure that the data, if it's not loaded yet, we're just going to make an empty thing be returned. Otherwise, if the data is loaded, then we're going to actually call the children and pass it the data. So if we look back at our index.tsx, all we're going to be doing is actually rendering this data string into the page. And it's going to have some other stuff here. So that's actually all we need. So if we do the build process, and then we run the start, and then we actually go to the page, localhost 3000, you can see that this actually popped up after about like a few milliseconds. And now if we actually go back to the Firebase database and we change this string and we press enter and then we come back here, you can see that it's actually changed. So we can go and change it to 123465, and then when we go back, you can see it immediately changes. So now this is how I found to do it easily. So when the page is instantiated, it'll actually initialize the application all over again, and then it'll actually run all of this. This is one of the easiest ways that I found to do it. You could also do something with React providers and use context. I'm sure there's other ways of doing it that you might find more useful. Hopefully this helped you learn how to do this. I also don't know of any dependency overhead that this might cause by having Firebase be needed for every single web page. It might be pretty large, but for my use case, it doesn't matter. So yeah, hopefully this helped you out. Thanks for watching.